Welcome back. You are watching Metropole Television. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage. Get in touch with us online at Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. I am at Kiage Simba on Twitter. Let's get talking. This is your official sector trends. Now, COVID-19 has posed an existing crisis for micro, small and medium enterprises with women-owned businesses not spared. Today, we discuss strategies to support the survival, revival and recovery of women-owned enterprises amid COVID-19 in the country and Africa as well. And joining us to aid this discussion is Akand Tiwari, who is an associate partner with Microsafe Consulting, a global consulting firm that enables social, financial and economic inclusion for everyone in the digital age. Mr. Tiwari, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Let's begin that conversation. What specific impact has the pandemic had on the women entrepreneurs? And when you look at that impact, is it possible to differentiate the impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the women-owned enterprises and the men-owned enterprises?
Definitely, and multiple studies that we conducted at Microsafe MSC highlighted this aspect. I'd give you three reasons and three differences that we found in our studies.
Yes.
So first is the financial impact. The financial impact globally, studies have found that 49% of women-owned enterprises were impacted. Some 30% men. As to supply chain, 80% of women-owned enterprises, they found maintaining a supply chain as an issue compared to some 67% of men-owned enterprises. In terms of income as well, I mean, close to 69% women enterprises would say that their incomes have decreased compared to, you know, some 55 odd men percentage. So there is a gender gap in all of these parameters. In Kenya specifically, we found that 49% of women-owned businesses actually had a temporary suspension. I mean, they weren't working as per their pre-pandemic levels. And when we speak about men, this percentage was 35%. So again, a huge gender gap there.
Yes. So just before we continue with this conversation, would you say that those impacts that we're talking about in 2020 are still with these businesses in 2021?
I mean, the impact has been more severe when the scale of pandemic has risen. So if I take you an example from Indonesian market,
yes.
In 2020 the challenges weren't that high because the lockdowns remained for a smaller period of time, and also businesses were closed only for a shorter duration. Now in the second wave, I mean, you see that in Southeast Asia and similarly in Kenya as well, the close downs are large and businesses are closed for a longer period of time. So depending on how the COVID wave is, the devastation is higher. And just to add a couple of more points on the impact, something which does not clearly come out but is quite a huge challenge is the mental stress. The women-owned enterprises, they are having very high mental stresses while they are managing all those difficulties in businesses. They're also, you know, doing all those household work, which is often unpaid. And I mean, the burdens have only increased over time because there are more family members, incomes have reduced, people are not going out of house, a lot of household work as well. Women segments per se have been quite unseen, frankly, I would say. In Kenya, there are 60% informal enterprises which are owned by women. But a lot of products, a lot of targeted at women in enterprises, not women enterprises, while there should be a specific focus on women enterprises. I would also say that this has been a reason for this huge gender gap that we have been seeing. during pandemic.
Pretty much. But let's talk about that risk. Because that's exactly how we've seen most businesses then sort of approach their activities in 2020 as we cross over to 2021. When you look at women enterprises, we have a report here. I just can't put a finger on who did that report, but we're saying that most women-owned businesses try to avoid as much risk as they could in a 2020 crossing over to 2021. When you look at that, the basic report there and that finding, could you say that this is why majority of them got heavily affected? Because the general principle was that you have to change, you had to adapt, you had to sort of find ways of getting your businesses afloat in a 2020.
I mean, I would agree with that assertion, Eliza, because a lot of enterprises, they had to change the way they were doing, they had to adopt.
Yes.
Now the strategy women-owned enterprises took versus men-owned took, there were differences. While of course men-owned enterprises were looking outside of their network, trying to find out, let's say, resources, strengthen their supply chain. Even if the credit on supply chain was not available, they would try and diversify the supply chain and get this, get the products. But women, I mean, when they faced these challenges, they actually dig up their own savings, which they had from business. So, I mean, the coping strategies for women-owned enterprises were very different than men-owned enterprises. It also has things to do with the social norms, cultures, and also, I mean, we have done studies where we have found that women entrepreneurs might not be more risk averse than men. And I mean, all of these behavioral wirings also play a role when a woman-owned enterprise or women entrepreneur would take decisions.
Yes. All right. So let's therefore address that question that we're talking about this morning, that how can we therefore make sure that we revive these women-owned enterprises and also make them survive? Where are we starting from, especially when you look at the environment that we're talking about?
Yeah, and I think this has been a key question a lot of us have been asking ourselves as well. I mean, what do we do? And I think the first step is to recognize the unseen segment, recognize and identify who are these women entrepreneurs, where they are, what do they do. And then, of course, I mean, it has to be an ecosystem approach. So both policymakers and financial service providers and other business development support services have to come together. I know them are already planning to do that or already doing it. One critical thing is, whenever these products or services or a subsidy program or a government support program is designed, we often miss on a critical element of gender centrality. I'll just very quickly, tell you what it is. So, when I'm designing a program, do I clearly know how women are going to use it? Will it create any additional burden on them? I mean, we already know there is huge unpaid care work burden on them. But if this new program requires them to take, let's say, X amount of trainings or X amount of workshops, is it adding burden? Can I reduce the burden in some way? I mean, we have to look at these aspects as well. We have to look at the, if I can use that word, user experience aspect of the program design itself. I mean, is it easy or is it creating more troubles? If it is easy, then women will use it. But if it is difficult, if it requires menfolk of little help her, then the take-up won't be that high, or even if the take-up is high, will not be that great. So, I mean, you have to be very gender-centric while and aware of these nuances when the programs are designed.
Yes.
And finally, I mean, people and organizations have been collecting data. Unfortunately, those data sets have not been analyzed to identify those gender disaggregated differences and then inform their decisions. So collect that data if you're not doing it, and if you have it, please use it to analyze what the gender differences are. I mean, these would be three critical aspects to start with when we are building back better for women-owned enterprises.
Yes. But let me just take you back again, Mr. Sumari, this morning. For anybody listening to you, are they not going to tell you that if you're going to approach businesses across the board, then you should approach them as a single unit as opposed to separating women-owned enterprises and men-owned enterprises, because what you're essentially trying to achieve is the revival, survival, and continuation of these businesses beyond the COVID season. Is that where we need to actually understand? And that's the question this morning. Why are we separating women-owned enterprises from men-owned enterprises for us to achieve success in these businesses?
Very good question, Eliza, and I'll tell you why. This entire women-owned or enterprise segment, or I would call informal economy.
Yes.
You know, there are more women in this economy than men. In Kenya, it is 60%, for example. Now, when a product or service is designed, would you develop it for 60% of your target segment or 40%? The challenge is, by design, products and services have not been designed for women per se. They are mostly designed for men because they are more visible in the segment. They're out there. They have better networks. And I think somewhere in this entire discussion, the underlying fact is that recognize and identify. They're different. I mean, we are doing a corner shop diaries studies, and we have diarists from Africa and Asia, and there are different segments of women enterprises. I mean, there are some who are just like you know, a typical other businesses want to grow her business, expand her businesses, but there are other women-owned enterprises where entrepreneur says, I want XYZ only. I don't want the entire world. There are these clear segments within the women-owned enterprise segment. But I mean, if you're not catering to this segment carefully, then I mean, we are going to miss the right products and services which different segments would need. And they are higher in number than men in informal economy. So the discussion is quite valid, that how do we design for women, or at least you know that this is a unique segment in the customer in the market as well.
Pretty much. So let's talk about exactly how even the banks view the women-owned enterprises in, let me say, the region as general. Do you think that the financial services sector is actually getting to recognize that they have a special group, women-owned enterprises, and how do they view them from what you said this morning?
Yeah, I see. Banks, these financial service providers, there, of course, I mean, they have their business strategies. Quickly answering your question, they have started recognizing. We are aware of banks and fintechs which are specifically targeting women-owned enterprises, other service providers, and I'm slightly moving from banks, but e-commerce players, for example. I mean, there are various examples where they are specifically targeting women-owned enterprises.
Yes.
The point is that as early you will realize that this is a unique opportunity for you, you would be the front runner in this competitive landscape. So I mean, so much so that I know that there are products for informal enterprises, credit products, data-based, digital credit products, which are out there. The challenge is the metric which is applied to assess an enterprise's creditworthiness has to be very carefully designed for women-owned businesses and men-owned businesses, because their characteristics are different.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that policy then. I mean, when you look across the board, you'll find that policy for supporting women in business is there, but those stats that you're giving us this morning in terms of how men occupy this space more than women sort of negate this policy that most of the economies are trying to push. So where's the disconnect when you look at it from that perspective?
I mean, a lot of this disconnect is because of, I mean, if I have to point at one thing, it is social norms. I
yes.
mean, you know, Women do not go out as much. They have smaller business networks. They are more risk averse. So I mean, another fact that during COVID we found that a lot of men-owned enterprises, they adopted digital payments sooner than women-owned enterprises. I mean, all of these aspects, they somehow make these two enterprise segments different.
Pretty much. So another question that somebody's going to ask you this morning is, while we were making gains in terms of getting more women into business pre-COVID across the board, how much has COVID sort of taken us back to where we are coming from when you look at exactly how majority of the economies in the region are reacting to the COVID-19 pandemic disruptions?
I mean, it has taken us back quite a few. I mean, this has not been quantified per se,
yes,
but I mean, it has resulted in reduced working hours. It has resulted in reduced wages. They are still largely in informal sector. I mean, those businesses were gradually digitizing themselves or moving into formal sector. I mean, most of them, I mean, would remain in informal sector for quite a while, and that's why we are also saying that, you know, is an identify all these women enterprises there. Very much, pretty much back to pre-pandemic, 5 or 10 years back. I mean, it has pushed us at least 10 years back, Eliza.
Pretty much, and that's not a good figure, especially when you're looking at it, which therefore takes me to the next area this morning as we come to the end of this conversation. As MSc, where are those opportunities that you're actually looking at so you can actually make therefore this conversation a wholesome one, especially in 2021?
Great question. So I'll answer this question in two parts.
Yes.
One, what should be policymakers or FSP should be looking at, and what we are doing at MSc on these aspects. So I mean, one approach that is worked or seems to be working is that if the policymakers adopt a life cycle approach to support these women-owned enterprises, not just a part of market linkage or access to credit, but right from when the business idea starts to until, you know, the expansion and the growth happens. There are some quick tips for policymakers as well. And in fact, the government of Kenya also started on this local procurement as much as possible from women collectives or women-owned enterprises. It actually helps women-owned enterprises in the informal sector quite a bit. There is an infrastructure challenge. I mean, how can we make, and these are open questions, how can we make cost of internet cheaper so that the access amongst women is also higher? The challenge is with expensive, let's say, data costs, the men folk get priority over women folk to get to access internet. I mean, these would be also broader questions that policymakers might look at. With regards to banks and other FSPs, I think they have been doing a terrific job already of starting or trying to target women-owned enterprises and offering them credit. I mean, they have to, I think, make more efforts. I mean, they have to recognize that there are different segments. It's not just businesses. There are different businesses, so how to cater to them. MSc has been supporting policymakers and practitioners. We provide ground-up evidence to policymakers. We conduct action research, help design better product services for women-owned enterprises. We do a lot of research. So I took an example of Corner Shop Diaries. We're collecting a lot of data from multiple countries and actually looking at the behavior of these women-owned enterprises. I mean, we have a global presence on ground, and we specifically have a gender equality and social inclusion practice. I mean, and we have colleagues in all across our offices. So, I mean, the focus on support to women-owned enterprises in the right manner is pretty much, and we will continue to work with and policymakers to meet and build that better for women.
Pretty much. Akant Sibwari, Associate Partner, Microsoft Consulting. Thank you very much for joining us this morning here on our Business AM.
Right. My pleasure.
We take a short break. Once we come back, your economic review, top on that. What is happening at Nabubi Business Ventures? Question is it just a short-term rally on their shares, or it is something that is bound to be a long-term stay once we come back here on Economic Review?